Comment from Alcaraz here on the camera. He says, job finished. He's really thinking about what to say, which is fair enough. 4 from 4.
It's great. It's great to know that, yeah, you're the youngest. Your name is going to be in the book records.
Scandal rocks tennis. Carlos Alcaraz wins Australian Open hours after massive $500,000 fine and shocking cheating allegations. Ladies and gentlemen, tennis fans, and everyone tuning in from around the globe, welcome back to Champions Tennisitics, your #1 source for the rawest, realest, and most explosive tennis news on the planet. Buckle up, because today we aren't just talking about forehands and backhands. We are diving headfirst into one of the most controversial, chaotic, and downright legendary 24 hours in tennis history. We have a story that has shaken the foundations of the ATP, a fine that could bankrupt a small tournament, and a victory that has cemented a legacy forever. Carlos Alcaraz, the Wonder Kid, the Prince of Clay, and now, the King of Melbourne. Yes, he did it. But at what cost? Just hours before stepping onto the court to face the greatest of all time, Novak Djokovic, Alcaraz was slapped with a record-breaking $500,000 disciplinary fine. The accusation? Technological doping. The evidence? A harmless-looking Whoop wristband that officials claim was doing a lot more than just tracking his sleep. Was he cheating? Was it a misunderstanding? Or was it a conspiracy to derail the young Spaniard's march toward history? And how, amidst all this noise, did he manage to step onto Rod Laver Arena and dismantle Novak Djokovic to complete the career Grand Slam at just 22 years old? We are breaking down the scandal, the science, the drama, and the glory. You do not want to miss a second of this. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get into the madness. Let's rewind the clock. The Australian Open, 2026. The atmosphere in Melbourne is electric. The heat is sweltering. But the temperature in the ATP offices? Absolute zero. Breaking news hit the wires like a thunderbolt. The ATP and tournament officials announced a staggering $500,000 disciplinary fine against Carlos Alcaraz. Let me repeat that. $500,000. This isn't a fine for smashing a racket. This isn't a fine for swearing at an umpire. This is the kind of money that signals something serious, something potentially career-altering, something that threatens the very integrity of the sport. The source of the controversy? A small, black strap on Alcaraz's wrist. The Whoop 4.0. Now, for those of you who don't know, Whoop is a fitness tracker. It measures strain, recovery, heart rate variability, standard stuff for elite athletes. In fact, it's approved for use on the ATP and WTA tours. Players wear them all the time during training and even during regular tour events. But here's the kicker. Grand Slams operate under their own rules, governed by the ITF, the International Tennis Federation. And the Australian Open officials were not just looking at what the device was recording. They were looking at what it was doing, what it was capable of, and whether it was giving Alcaraz an unfair advantage over his opponents. According to the official report released by tournament referees, a thorough inspection of the device Alcaraz wore during his fourth-round match against Tommy Paul revealed data logs consistent with haptic feedback activation. What does that mean in plain English? It means the device vibrates. Now, you might be thinking, so what? My phone vibrates all the time. But in the high-stakes world of professional tennis, information is power. The accusation is that this haptic feedback wasn't just a low-battery warning or a random notification. Officials suspect it was a coded signal, a form of real-time coaching transmitted wirelessly from someone in his box. 1 buzz for serve wide, 2 buzzes for serve down the tee, 3 buzzes for move forward. This is what they call technological doping, and it's one of the most serious allegations you can level at a professional athlete in the modern era. The ATP statement was blistering. They said, and I quote, Alcaraz's Whoop device not only tracked heart rate, sleep, and recovery, but data reportedly showed signs of haptic feedback being activated. Tournament officials believe this constitutes a serious breach of Grand Slam and ITF regulations on technological doping and fair play. Imagine the scene. Alcaraz is preparing for the biggest semifinal of his life against Alexander Zverev. He's in the locker room, focused, headphones on, mentally preparing for battle. Suddenly, officials storm in. They don't just want the wristband. They want everything. Shoes, rackets, shirts, water bottles. They brought in specialized equipment to scan for hidden assistive technology, The kind of stuff you'd expect to see in a spy movie, not a tennis locker room. The semifinal was temporarily suspended. Can you imagine? The tennis world was an absolute shock. Social media melted down. Was the golden boy of tennis actually a cheater? Was his team, led by his new coach Samuel Lopez, feeding him signals through his wrist? The conspiracy theories were flying faster than Alcaraz's forehand. Some people claimed this was a setup, that rival camps had tipped off officials because they couldn't beat him on the court. Others said this was the ATP finally cracking down on the technological arms race that's been quietly escalating in tennis for years. Still others wondered if this was retribution for Alcaraz's decision to split with his legendary coach Juan Carlos Ferrero, a move that had already generated enormous controversy in the tennis world. Alcaraz and his team vehemently denied the allegations. They presented logs showing the vibrations were simply alerts for heart rate zones, a feature used to prevent athletes from overtraining during a match, a safety mechanism rather than a coaching tool. The Whoop device is designed to buzz when your heart rate enters dangerous territory, either too high or dropping too low, which can be crucial information for an athlete pushing their body to the absolute limit in the scorching Australian heat. Data is not steroids, shouted Whoop CEO Will Ahmed on social media, defending both his technology and his star athlete. Ahmed pointed out that the device has been used by thousands of athletes across dozens of sports without incident, and that the ATP's own rules permit wearable technology during non-Grand Slam events, creating what he called a confusing and inconsistent regulatory environment. But the damage was done. The headline was out there. The fine was levied. $500,000. Gone. Just like that. Alcaraz had to pay up, shut up, and play on. Most players would have crumbled under this kind of pressure. Most 22-year-olds would have let the injustice eat them alive, would have let the anger and frustration poison their game, would have walked onto the court defeated before the first ball was struck. But Carlos Alcaraz is not most players. This is a young man who has already won 3 different Grand Slams, who has already been ranked world number 1, who has already defeated the greatest players of all time on the biggest stages. This is a competitor who thrives under pressure, who seems to draw strength from adversity, who transforms obstacles into fuel. To understand the immense pressure Alcaraz was under during this tournament, we have to look at his corner, at the people surrounding him and the massive changes he'd made in the off-season. This was the first Grand Slam tournament where Carlos was without his longtime mentor and father figure, Juan Carlos Ferrero. For years, Ferrero was the rock, the foundation upon which Alcaraz's game was built. The strict disciplinarian, the tactical genius, the man who molded the boy from Murcia into a champion, who saw his potential when he was just a teenager and dedicated himself to unlocking it. Ferrero was more than a coach. He was a guide, a protector, a second father. But in the off-season, shocking the tennis world and sending Spanish media into a frenzy, they split. The reasons were never fully explained. Some reports suggested Alcaraz wanted more freedom, more input into his own development. Others hinted at disagreements over training methods or tournament scheduling. Whatever the cause, Alcaraz made the bold decision to install Samuel Lopez, formerly Ferrero's deputy and assistant coach, as his head coach. Lopez had been part of the team for years, but he'd always operated in Ferrero's shadow, implementing the master's vision rather than creating his own. The media tore Alcaraz apart for this decision. He's lost his way, they said. Lopez is too soft, they claimed. Without Ferrero, the discipline will vanish. The work ethic will slip. The tactical acumen will disappear. Alcaraz will regress. He'll become just another talented player who couldn't handle the pressure of being number 1. The Spanish newspapers, notoriously brutal in their coverage of their tennis stars, ran headline after headline questioning the decision, interviewing former coaches and players who expressed doubt, creating a narrative of a young star making a catastrophic mistake out of arrogance or immaturity. And then, right on cue, the wristband scandal happens. It looked like the critics were right. It looked like chaos. It looked like a team that had lost its way, that was cutting corners, that was trying to find an edge through technology because they'd lost the tactical and mental edge that Ferrero had provided. When the semifinal against Zverev finally got underway after the investigation delay, after the humiliating search, after the fine was announced, Alcaraz looked rattled. He wasn't moving with his usual flow. He was checking his wrist, now bare because the device had been confiscated, constantly. The rhythm was off. The timing was a fraction of a second slow. Zverev, playing some of the best tennis of his life and smelling blood in the water, took full advantage. Alexander Zverev is a complicated figure in tennis. Incredibly talented, a former world number 2, but someone who's struggled in the biggest moments, who's been unable to capture that elusive first Grand Slam title despite reaching multiple finals. He saw this as his moment. Alcaraz was wounded, distracted, under investigation. The path to the final was wide open. Zverev came out firing, his massive serve clicking, his forehand finding the lines, his movement sharp and aggressive. He took the first set convincingly, and you could see the doubt creeping into Alcaraz's game. The errors were mounting. The body language was negative. The crowd, sensing an upset, began to turn. But this is where the narrative shifts. This is where we see the new Alcaraz, the version that doesn't need Juan Carlos Ferrero holding his hand, the version that doesn't need a vibrating wristband to tell him where to hit the ball. He dug deep. He found a level of focus that was frightening, that silenced all the external noise, all the accusations, all the doubt. He looked over at Samuel Lopez in his box, and Lopez wasn't panicking. He wasn't frantically signaling or looking worried. He just clapped, calm and steady, projecting a confidence that said, "I believe in you. We've prepared for this. You know what to do." Alcaraz took a deep breath. He reset, and then he unleashed hell. The second set was a complete reversal. Suddenly, the forehand that had been misfiring was painting lines. The legs that had looked heavy were flying around the court. The serve that had been tentative was bombing into the corners. Alcaraz broke Zverev twice, held serve easily, and took the set 6-3. The match had turned. Over the next 2 sets, Alcaraz played some of the most mature, tactically sound tennis of his young career. He mixed pace brilliantly, threw in drop shots to keep Zverev off balance, served smart rather than hard, and most importantly, he stayed calm. When Zverev made a run, Alcaraz didn't panic. When the crowd got loud, he didn't lose focus. He won in 4 sets, a thriller that proved beyond any doubt that this young man has the mental fortitude to match his physical gifts. As he walked off the court, having silenced the crowd and the critics, and most importantly Zverev, Alcaraz knew what was waiting for him. The final boss, the Serbian Wolf, the greatest player in the history of the sport, Novak Djokovic. Let's set the stage. Sunday at Rod Laver Arena, the cathedral of Australian tennis. On one side, Novak Djokovic, the 24-time Grand Slam champion, the man who has owned this court for nearly 2 decades, who has won the Australian Open so many times they should just name the tournament after him. He had reached the final after a spectacular 5-set win over Jannik Sinner, the defending champion and one of the brightest young stars in the game. Novak was chasing history, trying to become the oldest Grand Slam champion in the Open era, trying to prove that even at 38 years old, even with younger, faster, stronger players nipping at his heels, he was still the king, still the standard, still the man to beat. On the other side, Carlos Alcaraz, 22 years old, already a winner of the US Open, Wimbledon, and the French Open. 3 different surfaces, 3 different challenges, all conquered. He was 1 win away from completing the career Grand Slam, a feat that usually takes a decade or more to achieve, a feat that only 5 men in the Open era have accomplished before him. Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, Agassi, and Linder. That's the club. That's the pantheon. And Alcaraz, at just 22, was knocking on the door. But he was walking onto the court with a $500,000 fine hanging over his head and the whispers of cheater circulating in the stands, being discussed in the commentary booth, trending on social media. The psychological burden was immense. The match began, and it looked like the scandal, the pressure, the weight of the moment had finally taken its toll. Djokovic came out firing on all cylinders. He was painting lines like Picasso, serving like a machine, moving like a man half his age. His backhand down the line was lethal. His return of serve was impeccable. His court positioning was perfect. He was seeing the ball like a beach ball, anticipating Alcaraz's shots before they were hit, neutralizing the Spaniard's biggest weapons. He took the first set 6-2 in just 35 minutes. It was a demolition. Alcaraz looked lost, tentative, overwhelmed. The haters were typing up their tweets in real time. See, take away the wristband, and he can't play. He needed the signals. He's a fraud. Djokovic is going to win this in straight sets. But then, something clicked. Something fundamental shifted in Alcaraz's demeanor and approach. Samuel Lopez, the man everyone doubted, the man who was supposedly too soft and too inexperienced to handle this kind of pressure, stood up in the player's box. He didn't signal. He didn't shout. He just clapped, slow and deliberate and calm. The message was clear. Breathe. Reset. You've been here before. You know what to do. Trust your game. Trust your preparation. Trust yourself. Alcaraz looked up, made eye contact with his coach, and you could see the resolve hardening in his eyes. He took a deep breath. He bounced on his toes a few times, shaking out the tension. He adjusted his headband. And then, he unleashed absolute hell. The second set was a massacre in reverse, a complete role reversal from the first. Alcaraz's forehand, which had been misfiring and tentative, suddenly turned into a laser-guided missile, ripping through the court with pace and precision that left Djokovic flat-footed. He started reading Djokovic's serve as if he genuinely did have a computer in his brain, anticipating the placement with uncanny accuracy. He broke Novak twice. Games that Djokovic had held with ease all tournament suddenly crumbling under the relentless pressure. 6-2 Alcaraz. 1 set all. Game on. The third set was a dogfight. The kind of tennis that reminds you why this sport is so compelling, why millions of people around the world watch these gladiators battle for hours in the scorching heat. This was tennis of the gods. 20-shot rallies where both players covered every inch of the court, where the ball traveled at speeds that seemed impossible, where the physical and mental demands pushed both men to their absolute limits. Drop shots that defied physics, landing millimeters from the net and dying on contact. Lobs that scraped the sky, arcing impossibly high before dropping into the back corner like guided missiles. Passing shots threaded through gaps that didn't seem to exist. Djokovic was throwing everything at the kid. Tactical adjustments mid-game, changing pace to disrupt rhythm, slicing low to force errors, adding more spin to push Alcaraz behind the baseline. The mind games were in full effect. The stare-downs, the fist pumps after big points, the deliberate slowness between points to break momentum. But Alcaraz was a wall. He was everywhere at once, anticipating brilliantly, defending like his life depended on it, then turning defense into offense in the blink of an eye. His court coverage was supernatural. His shot selection was mature beyond his years. He won the third set 6-3, and suddenly the impossible seemed possible. The kid from Spain, playing under the shadow of the biggest scandal of his career, was 1 set away from immortality. Novak Djokovic may not be done yet. He's still world number 2. He's still capable of winning Grand Slams. He's still the most dangerous player in tennis on his day. He's not going anywhere, and writing him off would be foolish. But the torch has officially been passed. The era of the Big Three, that incredible 2-decade run of Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic dominating everything, is fading into history. And the era of Alcaraz is burning brighter than ever. What makes Alcaraz so special isn't just his forehand or his speed or his shot-making ability, though all of those are world-class. It's his mentality. It's his ability to embrace pressure rather than fear it. It's his joy on the court, the way he celebrates great shots from his opponents, the way he smiles even when he's down. Tennis has been desperate for someone who can carry the sport forward after the Big Three retire. Someone marketable, someone exciting, someone who plays beautiful tennis and has the charisma to connect with fans. In Alcaraz, they have all of that and more. He's the complete package. And if he can win a Grand Slam while dealing with the biggest scandal of his career, while playing without his longtime coach, while under investigation by tournament officials, imagine what he's going to do when they leave him alone, when the circus isn't surrounding him, when he can just play tennis. The rest of the tour should be terrified. The king has his crown, and he's just getting started. At 22 years old with a completed career Grand Slam, the sky isn't even the limit for Carlos Alcaraz. We might be watching the beginning of the greatest career tennis has ever seen. This Australian Open will be remembered for generations. Not just for the tennis, though that was spectacular. Not just for the fine, though that made headlines worldwide. But for the story. The story of a young champion who faced adversity, who was tested in ways that would break most people, and who responded with grace, determination, and absolutely brilliant tennis. This is the stuff legends are made of. Years from now, When we look back at the 2026 Australian Open, what will we remember? We'll remember the fine and the wristband, sure. Those will be footnotes, interesting trivia. But mostly, we'll remember the tennis. We'll remember a 22-year-old kid standing alone against the weight of the world and the greatest player of all time, and refusing to blink. We'll remember the kangaroo tattoo. We'll remember the passing of the torch from Djokovic to Alcaraz, handled with such class and mutual respect. We'll remember the moment Carlos Alcaraz collapsed on the court in Melbourne, having achieved something that seemed impossible. Carlos Alcaraz is no longer the future of tennis. He is the present. He is the reality. And if he can win a Grand Slam with the ADP breathing down his neck and his equipment being confiscated and $500,000 taken from his pocket, imagine what he's going to do when they leave him alone. The rest of the tour should be very, very afraid. The king has his crown, his place in history is secure, and at just 22 years old, he's only getting started. What a story. What a player. What a moment in tennis history. I want to hear from you guys in the comments below. Do you think the $500,000 fine was fair, or was the ADP trying to make an example out of Alcaraz? Do you believe the haptic feedback theory, or is it just tech paranoia and officials who don't understand how modern wearables work? And most importantly, can anyone stop Carlos Alcaraz in 2026? Is this the beginning of a decade-long reign? Drop your thoughts down below. I read every single comment, and I love hearing from the Champions Tennisitics community. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the absolute madness of Melbourne, into the scandal and the glory and everything in between, smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and helps YouTube show this video to more tennis fans who need to hear this story. And if you want to stay updated on the appeal process, on Alcaraz's next tournaments, on whether he can defend his titles at the French Open and Wimbledon, on all the latest tennis news delivered with the same energy and passion you just experienced, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you never miss a breaking story. This has been Champions Tennisitics, bringing you the most comprehensive, most dramatic, most in-depth tennis coverage on YouTube. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this community, and we will see you on the next one. Until then, keep watching tennis, keep supporting these incredible athletes, and remember that sometimes the best stories are the ones where the hero faces impossible odds and comes out victorious. Carlos Alcaraz just gave us one of those stories. See you next time.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to know that you're the youngest. Your name is gonna be in the book.
¿Los partidos de Carlos?
No, no los estoy viendo. No estoy viendo realmente. Sí, veo algunos vídeos de resúmenes.
Highlights.
Pero sí que es verdad.
He just said it was bull, basically.
How did you feel about sort of the way the match was handled during the whole situation?